Welcome, everyone. My name is John Elmuccio, and I'm one of the founders of Evolution St. Louis, a high-tech knitting facility in St. Louis. I will be speaking today on building the supply chain of the future in the United States, specifically how my journey led me here. A few years ago, my partner and I launched a company licensing apparel in swimwear and intimates with very recognizable designer brands. We had expertly designed, beautifully made, and well-priced product, but despite our 75 plus years of experience in the industry, we found it difficult to gain traction. We began to notice that retailers were having increasing challenges differentiating themselves from their competitors. They appear to be operating in an always-on-sale reality, mostly as a result of trying to project 15 to 18 months out and needing inflated IMUs to support that model. This fostered a risk-averse environment and inhibited newness and product innovation. And all of this was happening at a time when there was a dynamic shift in consumer buying patterns. Direct-to-consumer brands were emerging, focused on building connections with consumers who aligned with their authenticity, their designs, and their social messaging, whether it was about human rights, sustainability, or transparency in the supply chain. There's no doubt that the internet has created a more knowledgeable consumer who's accustomed to shopping online, an entire generation growing up buying digitally. That consumer is increasingly impatient, so shortening lead times is key. That consumer shops regularly, looking for newness, and wants it now. And that consumer has left many established brands with the burden to adapt. With heavy reliance on offshore manufacturing and developing product domestically, we're sending our intellectual properties overseas. So, with heavy reliance on offshore manufacturing, how can supply chains support this consumer paradigm and make it scalable? We all know that our industry has steadily lost manufacturing jobs over the last 40 years. Apparel manufacturing jobs are down from 902,000 in 1990 to 110,000 in 2019. Brands and retailers have been talking about reimagining the supply chains for years, but most were trying to fix the existing model by continually pushing for lower prices at the factory, continually stripping more and more out of the product, looking for faster boats, establishing huge overseas offices to coordinate sourcing, sampling, production, and building forecasting departments often larger than design departments. All of this to support the need for high-end IMUs built for that always-on-sale model. And in reality, the current supply chain is broken. There's good reason to be optimistic, though. In 2016, the Joint Economic Committee of the U.S. Congress, in a report titled The New Economy of Fashion, they stated that there are strong signs of a bright future for sectors of the fashion industry, primarily in design and high-tech manufacturing. They also stated that high-tech and creative jobs in these sectors often require more education and training, but they also hold the prospect for higher wages, better jobs, better paying jobs. And they noted that new technologies such as high-tech 2D and 3D knitting machines and 3D printing, as well as the emergence of e-commerce, have rejuvenated the fashion design industry. The main challenge for the U.S. has always been the cost of labor. And the question has always been, how can we be competitive in the U.S. when the cost of labor is too high? But what if cost of labor was not as big a factor in manufacturing? And what if the cost was not the only factor driving today's consumer? And what if transparency in supply chain and sustainability were being driven by the consumer? My partner always says we need to be more responsive to the supply chain by locating production in the U.S., and then brands and retailers will have a better chance of success. We need to shorten the supply chain and be able to react, not project consumer demand. So our conclusion was that we needed to reimagine the supply chain and what it looks like and take advantage of technology. U.S. production will allow for control of our intellectual properties, a better ability to manage inventory levels, the ability to make product that sells rather than projecting what might sell, and we won't have to jump on a plane and travel 16 hours. But building a traditional labor-intensive cut and sew facility is really not a viable option because it's still one person, one sewing machine. So to allow brands and retailers to keep pace with emerging trends, we need to create efficiency, quality, speed at a viable cost, and embrace technology. There have been innovations in robotics in cut and sew that use sewbots, but that technology is really not ready for fashion apparel yet, and it isn't scalable. So our approach was to revitalize the flatbed knitting industry and build an industry sector for advanced knitting and manufacturing. And we're doing that in St. Louis. St. Louis at one time was the second largest apparel manufacturing and first largest shoe manufacturing center in the United States. So it has a rich heritage that it wants to recapture. We wanted the ability to manage material sourcing, support technical design, sampling, production, and distribution. And this requires a lot of collaboration between manufacturer and the brands and retailers that we deal with. And because we wanted to create the most technologically advanced flatbed manufacturing facility and supply chain of the future, we wanted to be able to produce a lot of different products in fully fashioned knits and sweaters, knit to shape. We wanted to be able to knit footwear and smart textiles and high-tech products, technical textiles and niche products using complex shapes with minimal waste. And we wanted to be able to address small batch manufacturing. Technologies have advanced a lot in recent years. Those changes have been compared to the Industrial Revolution of the 1880s. But some of the most exciting advances and innovations have come from flatbed knitting technology. At Evolution St. Louis, we've built the most technologically advanced facility with cutting-edge 3D and complete garment machine manufacturing. Our facility is 32,000 square feet, and we've brought in over 30 of the latest Stoll ADF machines. And we have the capacity to bring in another 20 into this facility. In addition, the demand has been so great for our technology that we're currently building a second facility that's 132,000 square feet that will house another 240 machines. So our goal is to take advantage of technology and build a flatbed knitting sector. If you can imagine that in traditional cut and sew, it's still one person, one sewing machine. So the cost of labor is still quite high. But utilizing this technology, one person can run a bank of 10 to 12 machines. And yarn goes in one end and product comes out the other end. If you can imagine 3D printing, this is 3D knitting. You can go from having a tech pack to programming a style and having that program sent directly to the machine. Instead of dozens of workers working at individual steaming tables in the finishing department, we have computerized, automated uncurling and steaming tables. Product is fed into one end of those machines. The uncurling and steaming is done, it goes through a conveyor belt, and it's stacked on the other end. So rather than individual steam tables with dozens of employees, we can operate with 2 or 3 employees. Now imagine that this technology is taking place in yarn development. There's a whole revolution going on in yarn development. There are yarns that have embedded electrical heating elements, photovoltaic cells that can be knit into garments, all sorts of high-performance, high-tech products for the future. There are yarns that are sustainable, whether they are made from plastic bottles or companies like Evernew that are taking garment waste out of landfills, being able to break it down to molecular structures and reconstitute it into new fibers, a total complete cycle. There are bioceramic yarns and carbon yarns. The list of yarns is endless and the opportunities are endless. There are yarns available in sustainable yarns, both and organic yarns, both in wool and cotton. And with the combination of the technology available in machines and the technology available in yarns, you can now produce products that we couldn't imagine before, not only for the apparel industry, but for medical technology, for automotive, for electronics, and other industries. If you can do that, then you can really reinvent, recreate, and reignite manufacturing in the United States, in our case, taking advantage of high-tech knitting. We can build clean, sustainable factories next to schools, in art districts, across the street from a museum with no smokestacks and no environmental impact, which is exactly how and where our facility is built. But there needs to be cooperation from brands. And brands need to recognize that they need to be nimble in order to support this dynamic shift in consumer buying patterns. And they also need to understand that they need to be collaborative. If we're going to build this new supply chain and imagine this new supply chain, we have to work together. And that requires cooperation from manufacturers. We always felt that we had a broad vision to create a flatbed knitting sector, not only one facility. And in order to do that, we needed to pull in every aspect of society. We needed to have the .com, the businesses, which are the manufacturers and the yarn suppliers, the brands and the retailers. We needed to pull in .org organizations, groups like the CFDA, the St. Louis Fashion Fund, and innovation labs. We needed to pull in local governments and federal government who see this vision to bring back manufacturing to the U.S. in a meaningful way, utilizing technology with new jobs that create a future. And finally, we need to engage the educational environment. We need to be able to train these workers to be for the future. So working together, there is an ability to reimagine the supply chain. And from that, we will be able to create the supply chain of the future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, John, for that very interesting presentation. We've had a couple of questions that have come in. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump straight to them. The first question is, can your machines produce polos whole garment, or should that stick to the circular knitting machine?
So yes, our machines can produce whole garments. The difference between our machines and circular machines is that we can knit to shape. We can knit to any shape that's required, and we can knit multiple structures within a garment.
Thank you. Two parts to this question. The first one is, where is the statistic with the number of employees in the US manufacturing industry from? And the person wants to say that they found your presentation super interesting and thank you. And also, what would you say was your greatest technological achievement within the last 3 years?
Well, thank you for that question. The statistics actually, I believe, came from a website that's dedicated to statistics in the industry. I believe it's called Statistica, but don't recall specifically. I believe that's the case. I can't take any credit for any of the technological advances. They have been really created by two major machine manufacturers, Stoll and Shima, are the primary people in that space. I think that the vision that my partner and I had was to be able to see the white space that was available to utilize this technology and take it out of the innovation space and make it a commercial manufacturing environment.
Lovely, thank you. Do you help companies connect with yarn manufacturers?
Yes, we try and be a full service manufacturing operation. We really want to recreate the environment that buyers and supply chain people have been accustomed to doing business overseas. We have a full technical design team on staff that works with the brands and retailers, and we have our own stable of yarn suppliers that we deal with. Many times brands have nominated suppliers, and we will always try and recommend what the best solution is for the product that they're trying to develop.
Thank you. What specific actionable steps do you suggest that educators take to improve their collaboration with industry?
Well, we have reached out to a number of universities and colleges. We have great relationships with, for example, Kent State, who actually teaches M1 programming, which is the programming specifically that our machines run off of. NC State also has a very vibrant program. And we're also working locally with WashU University and Rankin Tech, helping them to develop curriculum to be able to teach, to put this into their fashion programs. I think it's very important as the whole industry is evolving that we start teaching the students what the practical needs are for the industry right now. You know, just teaching traditional pattern making and draping is wonderful as a base, but every part of our society is based on technology, and the fashion schools really need to embrace what technologies are available and bring that into their curricula.
Very interesting point. Another question to follow up on the polo question: can flatbed knit pick knit to shape?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
So sorry, I'm not sure I answered it correctly. Sorry. Can flatbed knit pick knit to shape?
Yes, we can knit any shape, and we're not limited to apparel. I mean, literally, we should knit a ball if we wanted to.
Okay, great. Another question, getting lots of questions in, John. What brands and retailers are you working with, or are you allowed to say?
Yeah, so we've signed a lot of NDAs, so I don't want to be hung. But what I will say is that we're working in the contemporary bedded and designer space right now.
Great, thanks. Can you tell us more about smart textiles, specifically knit circuits and conductive yarns and 3D pre-shaping?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of innovation labs that are working with, for instance, conductive yarns that are able to utilize other technologies and be able to, for instance, read your body temperature and determine whether you need to be warmer or colder. So a lot of experimentation is going on right now. There are yarns that are being developed that are actually LED capable. So the evolution in yarns is growing, and we're experimenting with a lot of those different technologies. Not as much in the apparel industry yet, with the exception of the performance space, but we're working on projects in the military and also for the medical industry for compression garments and that type of stuff.
Excellent. We've had we've had a couple emailed in as well. What about on-demand manufacturing? Do you think that this will ever become the status quo?
So I think that there are some individual companies that are dealing with on-demand manufacturing, but what we wanted to build was a scalable environment so that we can take that supply chain that's a 15 to 18 month cycle and shrink that down to 5 or 6 months. Going back to one of my statements where I said that, you know, right now we need to be able to react to demand and not project demand. So the ability is to be more responsive to the supply chain, but I don't think we're there yet to be able to deal directly with on-demand on an individual basis effectively.
Thank you. And you also noticed that you're obviously creating St. Louis to become an advanced knitting industry. How can other states replicate this throughout the US or in different countries?
Yeah, I think so. I think first of all, you know, I mentioned that there needs to be a collaboration between .com, .gov, .edu, and .org. I think it's important to have every part of those sectors involved in what you're trying to build. I think the other thing that my partner and I found as we shopped this idea around to different states was that you need to find a place that understands high-tech manufacturing, but also what we found more difficult than that were places that understood the apparel industry. Oftentimes we made pitches to cities, and they were very excited about bringing high-tech manufacturing into their environment. But whenever we started talking about the apparel and fashion industry, their eyes kind of glazed over, and they shouldn't put those two things together. So I think it's important to bring, as I said, .com, .org, .edu, and .gov together, but also to find the right environment of apparel and tech.
Excellent, thanks. And a follow-up question. Someone was asking, can the flatbed knitting machines able to knit piqué knit?
Yes. I'm sorry, was that the question? Yes. We can knit any structure. We can even emulate structures that appear to be woven.
Excellent, thank you. And you also mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that cost isn't so much a concern for consumers now. How do you change consumer demands? And do you think that this is something that is only possible now, that COVID has helped you help you going forward and applying made in the US capabilities?
Yeah, I think that's thanks for the question. It's a multifaceted question. I think that a lot of brands and retailers were starting to reimagine their supply chains prior to COVID. I think that COVID kind of accelerated that process. I think the consumer is a much more educated consumer. I think that one of the advantages, in particular, that a lot of direct-to-consumer brands is that they're speaking direct to that consumer, and they're able to get their message across. And so that consumer creates an emotional connection with that brand. So that not that price isn't important, but it's not the first driving factor.
Thank you. And another question, what do you believe needs to change in the technology landscape to support sufficient nearshoring of manufacturing capability?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat that?
Yes. So what needs to change in the technology landscape to support sufficient nearshoring of manufacturing?
Well, I think technology is continuing to evolve, and as we've all experienced in various aspects of our lives, technology is advancing at a very rapid pace. So I think that the technology is, while this flatbed knitting technology has been around forever, the evolution towards the whole garment technology, where you're able to knit just about any structure and any shape, is just coming into its own commercialization space. And I think what has to happen is that people need to recognize that not only do we need the manufacturing base, we need to have other parts of the industry be willing to step in and join this kind of revolution. What I mean by that is we need more yarn spinners, we need more local dye houses, we need all of those support mechanisms to help support manufacturing, to help this grow if we're really going to bring back manufacturing to the United States. And by the way, I would just like to point out that, again, I give credit to my partner. We always talk about bringing back the production and the volume. We're really not interested in bringing back the jobs that are in China. We want to create net new jobs that are well-paying jobs, that are jobs of the future.